Iowa Day at the Capitol before in the chat. So I am Mary Shika with Volunteer Iowa, and today we're joined by a Volunteer Iowa Commissioner, Cherian Koshy, our Executive Director, Adam Lounsbury, State Representative Brian Meyer, and my colleague at Volunteer Iowa, Jamie Orozco-Nagel. So we will be today talking to you, providing an overview of the Day at the Capitol, how and why we ask your participation, our Volunteer Iowa policy priorities, and tips for connecting with legislators. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, but of course, as was stated, go ahead and feel free to put items in chat or questions in chat that you would like us to address as we go along. So with that, I will turn it over to Cherian.
Thanks, Mary, and thank you all for being here. I just love seeing everybody's where they're coming from and participating, and how long you've been part of the Volunteer Day at the Capitol, and then some of you who are brand new. So for those of you that are new, this is primarily for you to just kind of understand, what it is that we do during the Day at the Capitol. Most importantly, we are meeting with legislators to educate and engage them, as it says there on the screen, about what Volunteer Iowa does. As you all know, Volunteer Iowa provides a wide range of programming and funding and training related to volunteerism that has an impact across the state. But many times the roles that we have are kind of behind the scenes, and politicians may not understand exactly how those programs are supported by the work that you all do. So it's helpful to them, and honestly, in every version of Volunteer Iowa's Day at the Capitol that I've participated in, legislators are consistently thankful for the information that we're sharing with them. So we host a Day at the Capitol, just like many other organizations do, to build awareness and let legislators, especially new legislators, know about how important volunteers are, how important service is, and how public policy affects volunteerism in our community. So this is a great way of sharing one message with those legislators, and giving you as representatives of your specific programs an opportunity, or sort of a gateway, to talk about what it is that you do in your organization, how that affects their constituents, which is super important, and really to celebrate, to tout the accomplishments that your volunteers and your service have in the community, and how important that is in terms of serving Iowans. So when we talk about what we are, or when we are doing it, and who we're connecting with this year, obviously, Day at the Capitol is going to be primarily or purposefully virtual. So it's going to be even easier for you and your organizations to connect with elected officials. And this is really an opportunity for you to give a legislator a call, hop on a Zoom meeting with them, or whatever is most effective for you and for the legislators. But really, anyone can participate because of that sort of accessibility barrier. I saw in the chat we were talking about, some people have put it on their calendar, but weather didn't cooperate, and certainly today is an obvious of where weather would not have cooperated, but we're able to involve staff members or board members, participants, other supporters who can talk about the value of Volunteer Iowa and really key into individuals that live in the constituency of our legislators. So lastly, I want to just talk quickly about why it's important to take part in the Day at the Capitol. And ultimately, there is sort of this worry or fear, especially I had this as coming from a nonprofit. Talking to legislators is sort of an overwhelming concept, but what I've realized over multiple years of participating is that they're really excited to meet with us, and they want to know about what we're doing in the community and how some of the pieces of legislation that they're discussing impact day-to-day lives of people that they seek to serve and our organization. The thing to remember here in bold is that if we don't share our priorities with legislators, really no one will. And so advocacy is one of the most important methods that we have at our disposal to achieve results. And many times legislators kind of get what organizations do at a high level, but they don't really see the impact, or they don't really connect the dots. And so hopefully this webinar will give you some clarity on what are some ways you can have those conversations, especially from an AmeriCorps perspective, what are rules to follow, and make sure that you fall within those guidelines of what's acceptable. And we'll go over that. But this is a great opportunity for you to connect with legislators and really express to them what the opportunities and needs are in our community to help serve Iowans better. Thanks again for participating in the legislature, participating in our volunteer day at the Capitol. And I will turn it over to, oh, sorry, I have one more slide, don't I? I'm sorry. And so, so I'm not going to thank you yet. Your role as a participant, you are going to set up times and to connect with your legislator. So a great way of doing that is going on this website and connecting with the legislator via email or their staffer, and indicate to them that you want to connect with them as part of Volunteer Iowa's Day at the Capitol. And honestly, this step is really super important because it gives the legislator an opportunity to know that you want to meet with them, and they can set up a time that's convenient for them. If you serve a single community or a region in the state, try to meet with legislators that represent those areas. They're obviously going to be more inclined to meet with you as quickly as possible within the time frame. And then take a look at the talking points that we'll discuss here, review those, and make sure that you're prepared to talk about those ideas and concepts. Jamie and Adam are going to talk about the policy priorities for this session. So that's a way for you to explain how they can support service and volunteerism in Iowa. And then after you've met with a legislator, make sure that you follow up with them to thank them. Many times they might ask for additional information. That's a great way to share copies of your materials or any of the materials that we talk about. And then the next step is to report back to Volunteer Iowa to let them know that you actually did connect with a legislator. And this is a really helpful way of us knowing, if there are other things that the Volunteer Iowa staff need to follow up on, but also to just kind of map out who we were able to connect with on our volunteer day as well. So that feedback is really helpful. And then share the information or share your participation on social media or website so that other people know that Volunteer Iowa had a day at the Capitol. That's really helpful as well. Then we know that our network includes federally funded national service corps members and staff. It's important for everyone to feel like they can participate in that day, but to do so in a way that is allowable. So if you're unsure of whether or not you can participate, ask your supervisor. There are some specific ways in which you are permitted to participate and other ways that are not. And you'll see here on the screen, many people are permitted, but not everyone is permitted to lobby. The thing to remember is that everyone can educate their elected officials about the programs that are important to them. So if you have any questions about whether or not you are permitted to engage in lobbying and talking about a specific piece of legislation, then definitely ask your supervisor. But everyone can participate in that educational role to their legislators. So let's talk about what that means in a little bit more specificity. So if you are educating, if you are communicating the issues that affect and your service by informing legislators about your program successes, and if there's a need or demand for those services. Those are all things that are appropriate. Where it crosses the line into lobbying is if you're combining that with request for a specific piece of legislation, as I said, whether that's for legislative language or for funding, then you're in the area of lobbying. So at the bottom of the slide here, you'll see that advocacy is a general term. Some advocacy would be considered lobbying, others is just considered educating. If you are focused on communicating issues and what's happening in your experience with the program that you serve and talking about stories of impact, you are on solid footing there. And if you are talking about particular policy proposals or asking for funding, that's when lobbying can come into play. So just to clarify, the IRS does limit nonprofit lobbying activity, and basically it prohibits an organization from forming for the sole purpose of lobbying under the guise of a nonprofit. There isn't a ban on lobbying for nonprofits. That's a commonly held misconception. And then specifically for some of you that are on the conversation or call today, for AmeriCorps and Senior Corps members that are paid 100% out of federal funds, they can't lobby during their service or work hours. So program alums can do so in their capacity as alumni, and staff can lobby on their own time. Again, if you have any questions about the distinction between educating and lobbying, definitely ask a supervisor so that you feel comfortable with that distinction and what you are able to say and what you're not able to say. So in terms of the priorities for Volunteer Iowa, we advocate for policies that build the culture and climate of service in Iowa. And these principles that we're going to talk about here form a yearly agenda for policy goals. And so you'll see here that we support the infrastructure for quality service opportunities and programs, develop new service opportunities to meet critical community needs, improve and streamline existing service opportunities and programs, and then finally to expand Iowa's existing volunteer base. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jamie and Adam. They're going to go into more detail about those policy priorities for our 2021 state legislative session. But now I will thank you for being part of this this webinar, and turn it over to Jamie and Adam.
Thanks, Cherian. This is Jamie Orozco-Nagel, a Program Development Officer with Volunteer Iowa, and we just want to take some time to talk you through some of our key talking points for this year's legislative day. We have a handout and some other follow-up materials that we'll be providing to you after this webinar. So we'll make sure we get the recording prepared, and we'll send it out along with a lot of other documents that will help you participate in the day. But we wanted to make sure we took some time live on this call to share with you some of the highlights that we would like you to share with legislators and some of our priorities for them to consider this year. So if you look at some of our key accomplishments from the past year, you can see some of these numbers about just the national service members and community volunteers that you all engaged in your programs, or some of you I know are service members yourselves, so thank you for contributing to this. And in the past year, we especially know that a lot of our programs were involved in activities to respond to the pandemic and to the derecho that occurred in the summer. So that's an area that we'd like to make sure legislators know about your contributions in those areas. Then we would like to talk through, for some of our key areas of programming, there's some specific impact that we think it'd be good for legislators to know, but also some specific asks. So as a reminder, this is where we get into that educating versus lobbying. All of you can share about the impact that these programs have in the community, but only some of you would be able to share the ask, kind of those specific legislative priorities. So starting with Senior Corps, we support all Senior Corps programming in the state in terms of we want to see Iowa be successful with foster grandparent, senior companion, and RSVP programming. But the commission is in particular responsible for administering state funding that goes to support the RSVP federal grants received. So I'll turn it over to Adam to share some highlights that we have for this year in that area.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So this year we obviously with COVID and the pandemic going on, 55 plus volunteering is more of a challenge, but one of the highlights that we have seen, especially if we're working with like the Feeding Iowans Task Force and other efforts to make sure we have food insecurity. One of the things we were able to as food volunteers tend to be older, the pantries and food banks have struggled for volunteers across the state. And one of the areas that we found was that areas that had RSVP counties, the pantries were doing a lot better. They didn't have they were able to figure out ways that infrastructure to support and figure out ways to keep volunteers coming in safe ways. So we feel that those that can and are volunteering are, and those that are struggling and finding new ways to volunteer, RSVP is needed more than ever right now to make sure that we maintain and really leverage that volunteer workforce in Iowa moving forward. So this year is a little bit different. We did get a Iowa RSVP or organizations received 19 new federally funded RSVP grants, which is over double the number of total grants in Iowa. So it is a significant expansion of RSVP in Iowa for our next fiscal year, which that means that the way the law is written, the current state appropriation, and this is a week old, so we just found this out, would trigger, without an increase in funding, they would, each RSVP program would receive approximately 67% of what they currently get. So about a third cut in funding, which obviously would be a bad thing for our existing programs, especially at a time when they're really needed and honestly operate on a shoestring budget. So, and have additional costs like PPP and things like that. So one of the things, we've notified the governor's office and they're going to be working with the legislature to try to get that increase in there. What we'll need is $139,000 in additional funding to maintain all of existing programs and then provide the new programs as well, to keep all those programs whole. So that is what we're asking for there, and move on to AmeriCorps.
Thanks, Adam. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our work in the AmeriCorps area, Volunteer Iowa administers AmeriCorps state grants, and we also operate our own intermediary AmeriCorps Vista program. Again, in our role supporting all AmeriCorps in Iowa, we're very lucky to have the AmeriCorps and CCC campus in Vinton. So many AmeriCorps members from all branches serving here in the state. This year we have several AmeriCorps priorities, some that are related to tax benefits that would go to all AmeriCorps members, and then some specific state funding items for certain AmeriCorps program areas. Adam, do you want to share some more detail about those?
Sure. Yeah, as Jamie mentioned, we have, we're lucky to have over 1,800 people serving in AmeriCorps in Iowa, which is about a third of the amount of people that serve in Peace Corps worldwide. So it's a pretty amazing number of people that are doing a year of national service here in Iowa. And with that, these are some of the priorities that the commission has identified as important and needed for our continued work to kind of leverage national service in Iowa. And so those just to highlight, Iowa is one of, we were the first state, and since we enacted it, 3 or 4, maybe 4 this year have followed, but that made the education award tax-free. And when we did that back in, I think, 08 or 09, the original bill actually included the full living allowance and the education award, but because of fiscal note rules and delay, they split it up, and the original plan was, even though it passed out of committee, was to bring it back the next year. And then obviously things change and priorities change, and it didn't get reintroduced. So it's been one that's kind of been on the back burner, but we feel, especially now with recruitment and the needs, and our goals of making sure that everybody can serve, and that we have an equitable, a program that's equitable for all Iowans, that they have the ability to serve no matter what their financial situation is. So, and just the core belief that we don't think the state of Iowa should be taxing people to serve. Should be so. It's not a wage; it's a living allowance, and so therefore, removing the income tax for those living allowance payments is what we're hoping for. The other 2 pieces, these are things that both the governor has proposed in years past or currently, or are currently receiving funding. Refugee Rise, the commission continued to support that program at least $200,000. It did receive a cut from $300,000 a couple of years ago, so I'm sure that they would want to get that back up. But our position is that they receive at least the $200,000 status quo funding, and then also the Reading Corps appropriation that right now, supported by United Ways of Iowa and some other local school districts across the state. Reading Corps is a proven strategy. It's worked. It's in our state code. But to be able to make sure that we're able to get programming in all branches of the state, even in areas where they don't have an active or vibrant community foundation or a United Way that has that philanthropic support, that the school district can afford to have Reading Corps members in those areas as well, that there be a baseline funding to help support that work moving forward.
Thanks, Adam. Now covering our mentoring priorities, Volunteer Iowa also houses the Iowa Mentoring Partnership and coordinates the Future Ready Iowa virtual mentoring program. So Adam will share a little bit more about our priorities in those areas.
Yep, and these are a little bit more convoluted, but historically the Department of Public Health has received an appropriation over the last 10, 12 years to provide grants to mentoring programs. A year ago, they removed a lot of the line items in there with the assurance that they would, without flexibility, they would continue to support mentoring programs and even have the ability to do more so. And that is actually rung true. They have increased grant amounts to mentoring programs. But I think, obviously the legislators at the time said, hey, we'll keep an eye on it, make sure that stays, that priority is maintained. So it's just one of those things, I think, to keep reminding and saying, hey, we want to make sure that commitment's there out of that, even if it's not a specific line item to Grant Public Health, who's been a good partner in this and maximizing funding and supports for prevention through mentoring programming. And the other piece is the governor's recommendation for the Future Ready Iowa mentoring program, volunteer mentoring program, which is the career. So we're going into the second year of this. The governor has asked for funding again to support this at the $400,000 level that it had been. So just maintaining that program to keep that program growing is what we're looking for in the mentoring area.
Great. And then moving forward to our last issue area. So Volunteer Iowa also administers Volunteer Generation Fund grants, helps coordinate a service enterprise program, the Governor's Volunteer and Volunteer Hall of Fame Awards, and we're also a lead host for the Iowa Nonprofit Summit. So these activities, as well as our other work in support of community volunteerism, is able to be carried out thanks partly to an appropriation from the state legislature that contributes towards our general operating expenses. So Adam will share more what our request is in that area.
Yep, thanks, Jamie. And this is this is an area that seems like we're asking for our general support, but really, you know, when I first got here 17 years ago, we were receiving a $225,000 appropriation, and now we're receiving for our general operating. Now we're receiving 170. So we've received cuts every time that there's an across the board cut, and we never go back up. So it's either status quo or cuts, and over time that's decreased to $170,000. So what that means is that, you know, those things support our general, like the Iowa Mentoring Partnership, the Volunteer Generation Fund match, and our overall operating match that we receive from federal programs. We've been able to, because we have other supports, and, you know, been able to make up for that. But a lot of that, you know, things like charging administrative fees to programs that we fund and things like that have had to been levered. So we have to leverage that through other ways that affect the programs locally, instead of being able to maximize it at the front end. So this has kind of been an ongoing one to get that back up to our prior levels, and continue to make sure that we're able to help to support our programs without passing on costs to them.
Great, thanks, Adam. And now we're going to turn it back over to Mary.
Thanks, everyone. We do realize that we are coming up on our scheduled time to end the webinar. We do have a little bit more information to share, and we have a video to share from one of our state representatives. So if you're able to continue to stay with us, we'd appreciate your time. And if not, please reach out to us. This will go out. We'll be sending this out, but follow up with us if you have further questions and can't continue to stay on the webinar with us. So with that, I'm going to share a message for one of our state legislators, Representative Brian Meyer. I would encourage you to turn your volume up. This is a little bit quieter than the volume on the webinar.
Mary, we're not getting the sound through right now. I don't know if you want to restart it.
I was afraid I saw a connectivity issue.
Mary, we could just have you reenact it too.
Yes, no, I will reshare. I was getting a message. I'm lucky my internet has survived this long. So I was seeing that perhaps was going to be the issue.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Meyer. I'm a state representative, and I represent the southeast side of Des Moines. My House district is House District.
Okay, we'll try a third time, but you were able to hear?
Yes, we could. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is Brian Meyer. I'm a state representative, and I represent the southeast side of Des Moines. My House district is House District 33. Thank you for having me today, and good afternoon. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how to advocate with legislators about your issues. And so one of the things that is very important in this time of COVID is to talk about how to contact your legislator. The best thing you can do is to either email or phone them, and to try and set up a time to have a phone conversation with them. Another important thing is to let them know that you're a constituent. And it's always best to start with your legislator and have a relationship with them, and let them know that you are a constituent, and that this is an important issue to you. So when you get into talking about your issue, I think it's very important to start off directly with what are you asking for? And I don't think that's a problem at all with most legislators, because a lot of them have very limited time to talk. A lot of legislators have different jobs. Some are full-time legislators, some are attorneys, some are different jobs in the community. But the best thing you can do is to get their attention right off the bat, explain to them what you're looking for, and then get into why it's important to you and important to your community about this program. And give like a little elevator speech, right? And so make it short but impactful. Let them know why it's important to you, it's important to your community. Let them know exactly what you're asking for. And then give the legislator an opportunity to ask questions and invite them out into the community to see what the program is all about. And also, most importantly, in this conversation is to follow up with your legislator. Follow up with them, keep them updated on where in the process the funding is, or where that particular issue is in the legislature, because most legislators are gonna make the best effort they can to find out about your issue, educate themselves about your specific issue, but also they need help and they need to keep it in front of them, and so that they can keep track of it themselves. So those are the main things. Is at this time during COVID, you don't want to be going to the Capitol, but you want to reach out to your legislator. You want to give them the specific information, be upfront about what you're asking for, let them know about the program, invite them to see in the community what the program is, and then follow up with that legislator. I think if you do these things, you'll get a very positive response from your legislator. And of course, the bottom line is be kind, let them know how important it is to you, and just advocate, be there for them if they have any questions. I hope this helps you today. It's a weird time to try and advocate in front of a legislator because of COVID. But there's so many ways you can do it, either a phone call or an email. Best of luck to all of you, and I hope you are very successful.
And we thank Representative Meyer for sharing his perspective as an elected official, and just remind all of you of some of the tips that he mentioned in his video. And also just remind you that they are elected officials that were elected by you, and they are there to represent you, and so they do need to hear from you. They are your community members and your neighbors. So one thing that perhaps wasn't mentioned is at the end, ask if it's okay to take a photograph with them, and make sure that you share that on social media and tag Volunteer Iowa, and also tag the legislator as well. They like to share in their newsletters and their outreach to let the folks know that they're meeting with constituents as well. Volunteer Iowa does ask you to complete an after action report. There will be a Survey Monkey that we will send to you so we can track the legislative contacts, and also so that we can follow up if a legislator might have had a question that you couldn't answer or ask for more information. It's okay to not have an answer for a legislator. Just tell them that you'll get back to them with the information, and we'll help provide that for you. Just in review, it is really important to reach out to legislators in advance to set up a time for a call or a video meeting that day. Make sure that you have an agenda, a strategy, your talking points. Make sure you share some personal stories along with the data. Send thank yous, do follow up. Representative Meyer mentioned just continuing to follow up with them. This is not a one and done deal on this day. Follow up with them if there are specific priorities that you'd like to continue to follow with them. Again, share photos, invite them back to a local event so they really get to know your program, visit your program and its community. Involve stakeholders and clients, constituents, if at all possible, as part of your meeting. And include them, legislators, on your newsletter distribution lists and press releases. So you're in contact with them again more than just this one day. So with that, we will pause and see if there are questions that folks would like to unmute and ask, or if there are any questions in chat. Jamie, I'll let you field questions. Is there anything in chat?
There were just some questions earlier about getting a copy of the presentation. So I know we've shared a couple times that we'll make sure that the link to the recording is sent out, and we can also have the slides available to folks. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time.
Well, if there aren't any questions in real time now that people want to ask, feel free to reach out to us at the ICVS email, or if you're in contact with one of the other staff members at our Volunteer Iowa, feel free to reach out to them as well, and we can get answers for you and more information. Appreciate you being on the call today. Really appreciate you participating in Volunteer Iowa Day at the Capitol on February 9th. Appreciate all that you do to serve Iowans every day. Thank you so much.